The story begins in July 2019 in the quiet, affluent suburb of Riverside. The Hendersons, Thaddeus, 45, an ambitious and highly successful investment banker, and Margot, 43, a charismatic part-time yoga instructor, were widely seen as an ideal couple. Their 10-year presence in the community made them well-known and admired. Thaddeus Henderson was raised in a working-class family in rural Iowa. Through relentless ambition and hard work, he climbed the corporate ladder to become a respected figure in the finance world. Margot Henderson came from a more creative, liberal background. A former modern dance student, she shifted to yoga instruction after a knee injury ended her dreams of performance career. The couple met at Charity Gala in 2003 and quickly married in a grand wedding. Early years were filled with love, mutual support, and a shared vision of success. Over time, cracks began to form. Thaddeus became increasingly consumed by work, often staying out late and emotionally distancing himself. Margot, once fulfilled by her social roles in yoga teaching, started feeling caged and unfulfilled, especially as they struggled with infertility. The facade, despite the growing emotional disconnect, they continued to project an image of happiness to the outside world, attending events, hosting parties, and maintaining social ties. Theme of superficial perfection. The Hendersons embodied the illusion of the perfect marriage, but in reality, they were two people growing apart, each locked in isolation, avoiding the hard conversations and emotional truths that might have saved them. Introduction of the neighbor's son, Aidan Blackwell. Aidan was the only son of the Hendersons' neighbors, the Blackwells. He had recently returned home from college for the summer. Athletic, charming, and impulsive, Aidan often helped his parents with yard work, sometimes exchanging pleasantries with the Hendersons. Initial contact. Margot and Aidan's first meaningful interaction happened during a backyard gathering. Margot, feeling invisible in her own marriage, noticed Aidan's easy laughter and attentiveness. He, in turn, found Margot's confidence and maturity alluring. Escalation of the affair. What began as innocent flirtation, brief conversations, shared smiles, quickly escalated. Margot and Aidan started meeting secretly during the afternoons while Thaddeus was at work. Their relationship was driven by lust, loneliness, and a mutual thrill of secrecy. Psychological dynamics. Margot was not just seeking passion. She craved validation. Aidan made her feel seen and desired, something she hadn't felt in years. Aidan was intoxicated by the idea of seducing an older, married woman. He believed he had control, unaware of how deeply Margot's emotional instability ran. Warnings ignored. Friends and neighbors began to sense that something was off. Margot seemed happier, almost euphoric, while Aidan was seen sneaking around more frequently. However, no one imagined the dangerous bond forming behind closed doors. The breaking point. Margot grew possessive, increasingly resentful of Thaddeus's indifference and Aidan's youthful detachment. Her feelings toward Aidan began shifting from lust to obsession, a dangerous development that laid the groundwork for the crime that would follow. Early encounters. The affair between Margot Henderson and 19-year-old Liam Cooper, not Aidan Blackwell, as previously mentioned, apologies for the mix-up, began shortly after a fleeting but electric moment at the Henderson summer barbecue. A brush of hands in the pool house while handling a bag of ice sparked a connection both unexpected and powerful. The age gap and taboo. Margot, more than twice Liam's age, felt a thrill not only from the attraction but from the transgression itself. Liam, an intelligent but socially awkward college student, was enthralled by Margot's confidence and attention. Their bond blurred the lines between desire and emotional dependency, from innocence to obsession. Their initial meetings were masked as casual favors, Liam helping with tech issues or gardening. But soon, these innocent tasks became covers for secret rendezvous. Their first kiss occurred during a sudden rainstorm at a park, marking the transition from flirtation to full-blown affair. Dangerously bold. As the relationship progressed, they grew reckless, meeting in public spaces like the cinema, the library, and, most dangerously, in the Henderson home itself while Thaddeus was at work. These meetings were marked by intense passion and increasingly poor judgment, guilt and psychological strain. Liam struggled with mounting guilt, especially over betraying Thaddeus, a man who had mentored and supported him. Margot was torn between exhilaration and self-loathing. Her lies were piling up, and the emotional escape Liam offered was beginning to feel like a trap. Warning signs. A few neighbors noticed strange behavior. Unfamiliar glances, Margot's odd absences, and Liam's increased presence at the Hendersons' home. Elaine, Liam's mother, became suspicious, but didn't realize the full extent of what was unfolding. Unwilling to end it, despite increasing fear and tension, neither Margot nor Liam could bring themselves to end the affair. They were locked in a cycle of need, secrecy, and mutual addiction, oblivious to how close they were to disaster. Thaddeus Henderson had been noticing subtle but troubling changes. Margot's detached behavior, odd schedules, and Liam's frequent presence. What finally tipped him off was a forgotten smartwatch, synced to Margot's phone, which revealed intimate messages between her and Liam. Thaddeus confronted Margot late one night after reading the messages. Initially, she denied everything, but faced with the evidence, she broke down and admitted to the affair. Thaddeus, enraged and devastated, stormed out of the house and disappeared for hours. Friends and family later described Thaddeus as a deeply proud and emotionally reserved man. The betrayal shattered his self-image and trust. According to one friend, he wasn't just angry, he was broken. Something inside him snapped. Days later, Thaddeus invited Liam over under the pretense of wanting to talk things out man to man. What happened next is chilling. Thaddeus reportedly locked the doors behind Liam. A violent argument ensued, neighbors heard shouting. Moments later, a gunshot rang out. When police arrived, they found Liam dead from a single gunshot wound to the chest. Thaddeus was sitting on the porch in silence, hands bloodied, the gun placed beside him. He surrendered without resistance. Thaddeus was charged with second-degree murder. During interrogation, he claimed he had only meant to scare Liam and that the gun discharged accidentally. But forensic evidence contradicted that account. Prosecutors argued it was premeditated revenge driven by humiliation and rage. The scandal devastated Margot. She became a pariah in her community, faced intense media scrutiny, and attempted to take her own life shortly after the incident. She survived but remained under psychiatric care for months. Thaddeus Henderson's murder trial quickly became a media sensation, drawing local and national attention. In court, the prosecution painted a picture of a calculated, cold-blooded killing motivated by betrayal and pride. They emphasized Thaddeus' invitation to Liam as proof of premeditation. Text messages showing Thaddeus lured Liam to the house. Security camera footage from a neighbor's doorbell showed Liam entering but never leaving. Ballistics and forensic evidence showed the bullet was fired at close range with no signs of a struggle, suggesting Liam never saw it coming. Thaddeus' internet search history included phrases like how to cope with infidelity and justifiable homicide. Thaddeus' lawyer argued it was a crime of passion, not premeditated murder. They highlighted his clean record, his emotional distress, and Margot's infidelity as psychological provocation. They also introduced mental health experts who testified that Thaddeus may have experienced a dissociative episode. Margot took the stand in tears. Her testimony was key and controversial. She admitted the affair but described it as a confused emotional connection that spiraled out of control. She expressed deep remorse and claimed she never imagined things could end in violence. Her presence in court polarized observers. Some blamed her for the tragedy. Others saw her as a broken woman who made a terrible mistake. After deliberating for 2 days, the jury found Thaddeus guilty of voluntary manslaughter, not second-degree murder, suggesting they believed the crime was not fully premeditated but driven by extreme emotional disturbance. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 10. The verdict sparked debate. Some believed justice had been served, while others thought the sentence was too lenient. The story became a cautionary tale of how unresolved marital issues, unchecked emotions, and forbidden desires can lead to irreversible tragedy. The once quiet, tightly knit neighborhood was left in disbelief. Many neighbors had known both families for years and were stunned by how everything unraveled behind closed doors. Some refused to speak to reporters, while others expressed a sense of betrayal. "You think you know people," one neighbor said, "and then something like this happens." Liam's parents were devastated. He had been their only child, and their grief was palpable. At his funeral, friends remembered him as kind, adventurous, and full of potential. His mother publicly said, "We lost our son not just to a bullet, but to a web of deception we never saw coming." The family later pushed for tougher laws around domestic violence and mental health evaluations in cases involving infidelity-related crimes. After the trial, Margot moved away. She faced harsh judgment and social exile. Some accused her of causing Liam's death, while others believed she had been manipulated and emotionally abused in her marriage. She reportedly changed her name and began therapy. There were unconfirmed rumors she tried to take her own life in the months following the trial. Behind bars, Thaddeus kept a low profile. Sources say he became introspective and started writing a memoir, reportedly titled What Broke Me. He refused most interview requests but told one journalist through a letter, "I am not a monster. I am a man who made the worst mistake of his life when pushed past the edge." The tragedy sparked online debates about infidelity, power dynamics in relationships, and justice in crimes of passion. A true crime podcast, and later a documentary, explored the case in depth for the community and the families. However, the case was not entertainment. It was a reminder that sometimes the people closest to us can cause the deepest wounds. Thaddeus's descent into violence is framed as the tragic climax of unchecked obsession. His inability to let go of control over Margot, his wife, turned possessive love into lethal rage. Experts featured in the video suggest that this wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a culmination of psychological and emotional instability exacerbated by jealousy. The narrative emphasized how betrayal, both real and perceived, can deeply affect people, especially in intimate relationships. In Thaddeus's mind, Margot's affair wasn't just infidelity. It was a threat to his identity, masculinity, and control. The video underscores how betrayal, when mixed with suppressed emotions and pride, can explode into irreversible actions. Was Margot partially responsible for what happened? Should Liam have been more cautious getting involved with a married woman? Was Thaddeus a victim of his emotions, or just a cold-blooded killer? While Thaddeus was convicted and sentenced, the video concludes by stressing that there were no winners in this case. Liam lost his life. Margot lost her reputation and peace. Thaddeus lost his freedom. 3 lives, and many others, were ruined by one deadly choice. The trial begins 6 months after the events that shattered the community. The courtroom atmosphere is charged with emotion as Thaddeus Henderson stands trial for the murder of Liam Cooper. Both the prosecution and defense work to shape a narrative around the tragic events, offering starkly different views of Thaddeus and his actions. The prosecution, led by Veronica Talbot, presents Thaddeus as a man driven by rage and jealousy. They argue that his violent outburst was a result of a long-standing emotional buildup due to his failing marriage and the shock of discovering his wife's affair. Talbot's opening statement paints him as a man consumed by uncontrollable emotions, seeking retribution for betrayal. The defense, led by Sterling, counters by portraying Thaddeus as a devoted husband who was pushed to the brink by a devastating betrayal. They claim that Thaddeus's violent reaction was a result of temporary insanity triggered by the emotional shock of his wife's affair. Sterling suggests that the incident, while tragic, was an accident that spiraled out of control. Forensic experts testify about the violent nature of the attack, with detailed analysis of the blood spatter and the force required to cause Liam's fatal injury. Neighbors recount their observations of the day, adding context to the underlying tensions in the Henderson household. One neighbor recalls hearing raised voices, suggesting a confrontation had occurred prior to murder. One of the most gripping moments of the trial is Margot Henderson's testimony. She openly admits to the affair with Liam, describing how her marriage to Thaddeus fell apart and how the relationship with Liam began. Her testimony is emotionally charged as she grapples with guilt while trying to explain her actions. She acknowledges that her affair was wrong, but also insists that it did not justify the violence that led to Liam's death. Under cross-examination, the defense attorney attempts to paint her as a manipulative wife who played a key role in the tragic events. But Margot stands firm in her version of the truth. Elaine Cooper, Liam's mother, offers a brief but powerful testimony, speaking about her son's kindness and future dreams, now tragically cut short. Her dignified and emotional account deeply affects many in the courtroom, adding a human dimension to the loss. In a surprising twist, Thaddeus decides to testify, despite his lawyer's objections. His testimony is a conflicted portrayal of a man caught between remorse and anger. He speaks about the stress he was under at work, his deteriorating marriage, and the shock of discovering his wife's betrayal. He claims that he never intended to cause Liam serious harm, but rather, he simply lost control in a moment of emotional chaos. The testimony portrays him as a man who, for a brief moment, let his emotions completely overwhelm him, leading to a tragic and irreversible action. To understand the motivations behind Thaddeus's violent outbursts, psychologists provide insight into intermittent explosive disorder, IED, a condition characterized by disproportionate bursts of aggression in response to emotional triggers. They suggest that Thaddeus's stressful career, marital dissatisfaction, and the shock of his wife's affair contributed to his violent reaction. The defense calls on a family therapist to discuss the psychological effects of infidelity on an individual's sense of identity and emotional trauma that comes with it. This testimony attempts to explain Thaddeus's extreme response as a result of profound emotional pain. After several weeks of testimonies and evidence, the jury is tasked with deliberating on Thaddeus's fate. The case leaves the jury grappling with complex questions about human emotions, betrayal, and the human capacity for violence under extreme emotional distress. After intense deliberation, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of voluntary manslaughter, not second-degree murder. This suggests the jury believed Thaddeus did not premeditate the killing, but acted in the heat of passion after discovering his wife's affair. The judge acknowledges the emotional turmoil that led to the killing, but emphasizes that taking a life in anger still warrants serious consequences. The sentence strikes a middle ground between punishment and empathy, reflecting the complicated emotional layers of the case. Some sympathize with Thaddeus, seeing him as a man who snapped under extreme betrayal. Others believe he should have received a harsher sentence, arguing that emotional distress does not excuse lethal violence. Margot Henderson, now emotionally shattered and socially ostracized, chooses to leave town, facing shame and grief. Elaine Cooper mourns her son Liam quietly, feeling the sentence was enough to account for her son's stolen future. Thaddeus's own family is left to grapple with the emotional aftermath, trying to reconcile the man they knew with the act he committed. Once a peaceful community, it now carries a lingering sense of tragedy and discomfort. Neighbors become more distant and guarded, unsure how to process the shock of what happened in such a familiar setting.